don't know if you heard about that, but I didn't hear of any Vegas protests. I guess they don't protest.
But it's to the customer.
To the customer, and there are other models. So I mean, you know,
It's actually just, it is the charging the passenger is increasing
right.
around the country. We're doing it in a few cities now. That a lot of cities are looking at it and adopting it. And Chris, just I'm saying the convenience. What I'm saying is what's happened in Vegas, which started where we could actually owe it to Jason's foresight back there, of a voucher fee, but has grown into a convenience fee of charging a passenger is something that a lot of cities, I know, there are a bunch around the country now that have adopted passenger pay models. They're actually pushing the cost off to a customer. If you think about it, when you go to a movie theater and you go to the kiosk, you're paying a fee that you wouldn't pay if you waited online to buy a ticket in the same theater. And the reason, and Chris, and that's where you can look at it now, is they recognize the concept of a convenience fee. And just as the lunacy and that you can't charge more for a credit card, but you can discount for cash, and you look at the gas station and you scratch your head, you know they're not discounting, they're charging more. But it's a semantic game, but in the cab industry, if you wanted to look at pushing a fee off to the passenger, you can do it, but you have to do it within the rules. And the rules, you can't charge more for a credit card. So the way basically, if you think about it, that machine that goes into the car, that's sitting there accepting the credit card transaction, it's a kiosk, no different than the movie theater. The person that owns and operates that kiosk is not the driver of that car, nor is it the cab company. So the driver, he accepts cash. The cab company, they accept cash. The owner of the kiosk in that car will charge a surcharge on any form of payment that you do through that kiosk. It just so happens that credit debit is the only form of payment that kiosk accepts.
It's like the Fandango model.
So it is a legitimate model that's recognized by the association. So you can consider it in your municipality. I mean, there still is a debate: does it promote or dissuade credit card use? Is it good for PR or not? What kind of industry do you have? But there is an acknowledgement that there needs to be a cost recovered, and people are used to paying the cost. Now, when they go online and buy tickets, they go to a movie theater, buy tickets, you're getting more and more of the fee. The ATM fee has been there forever. So people it's becoming part, it's just figuring out what is a correct amount to do. So it can be considered.
Yeah, before we take some questions, Christian, I wanted to jump in, and also just curious, did it go in Vegas from a driver to a passenger, or was it just codifying the passenger fee that was always there?
It's codifying the passenger fee.
They never had to deal with the drivers.
Correct. Drivers are employees in Vegas, so they don't pay any credit card costs at all, and that's how it went to be.
Across the board. Okay, Christian?
As Mark always reminds me, our job is that one of our primary clients is the customer, and I find the customer is almost never present in these debates. And the $3 cost we could have done through that business model, but I couldn't in good conscience charge the customers $3 to use a credit card. I feel we're trying to promote taxi ridership, and I didn't think that would be something that would be acceptable.
Can I add something? So I think that the concept of, I agree with Mark that at the end of the day the passenger is paying the fee, but it's cosmetic to how does he pay the fee. I think that bundling it into the meter fare is always going to be debatable by the driver. I don't think that it's something that can be sustained. I don't think that it's something that can be sustained for long unless a PR is constantly put out there and constant education to the driver. But I think the fact that we have so much turnaround of drivers in the market is always going to be a challenge. Since the passenger is going to pay the fee anyway, at the end of the day, is also cosmetic. Again, is how do you present it to the passenger? I think that if you present it as a voucher, it's also taking it to the extreme. If you present it with the $3, I don't know if $3 is the actual fee. This can be debated and this can be calculated. But I think that if you take that, up to I think about 6 months ago, so when the Dodd-Frank Act was passed in the government, the only companies that had to say about surcharging was the credit card companies. Well, no longer. The government allow the merchant now to discount for cash transactions, which is the same thing, like a voucher, but it's a discount for cash transaction, something that we all be probably familiar with years ago was done by the gas stations. I think this is something that should be thought about, or a concept that should be entertained in on a short run or a long run, because I can guarantee, I mean, I've been doing that since 1994. And I think the first large-scale project we had is in Philadelphia. But since, I think, any market we went to, if the driver had to pay the fee, I'm telling you, it's a constant debate. And it's not going to go away. So it's been a challenge. I think it's been a challenge on the vendor side because we are affected when the driver refuses for credit card transaction or credit card payments. We get affected. We don't get our anticipated volume or projected volume. The driver's always going to be complaining. Like I said, the new norms is always change. You can start with 5%, and I guess 3 weeks later, 5% is too expensive. I can guarantee you that even if you went to 2.7%, it will be nice for another 6 months before the norm change again.
I've got one quick comment before you, so sorry about that. But it brings up a good point. I'm an outsider looking inside, and when I was flying here and debating the 5% debate, it was clear to me an easy solution because I've done it in almost every other industry I sell to besides this industry, and that is I've taken what we do for government and municipality and taken that surcharge and convenience fee and applied it to landscapers, property rental places, storage units, et cetera, because Visa now allows us, following the rules you just stated, which would take care of all the parties up here, it allows us to call it a convenience fee as long as it is web-based transaction. Okay, whether it's keyed or swiped. So I'm going into all these businesses across America. For instance, we're closing billion-dollar property managers and setting up the fact that you can take credit cards and charge a convenience fee to your renters or your storage units or your landscapers, et cetera, and charge anything that you want to, 1% to 5%, $1.95 to $3.95, et cetera, as long as you're taking that payment via a web-based convenience fee. So to me, I know as a driver, you add $1.50 for the toll, you add $1.10 for my credit cards, you guys can start small. You don't have to charge the full 3%, 5%, but why would you not pass on $1.50 to me as a driver, as a passenger, or $2, et cetera? I would pay it all day long. So.
Can I just say, I'll tell you why, when you come to the city, why we won't be doing that. Because, Paul, when you come into our airport right now, you're paying $7 to get over for basically a $15 ride. It's costing you $7 additional to pay for the airport pool, to pay for the tunnel on the way over. And if you as a passenger would like to add $3 more onto that fare, and you think that that's a desirable way to deliver and that it's going to be good and healthy in terms of the number of cab rides, I don't think so. I honestly don't think so. I can only speak to my city, and I think that it depends on the city that you're in, but we would be up to a $10, after we get done with our drop, and we get done with our meter, and we get done with all the pairs, the pay, just before we clicked into your credit card system, we'd say to the passenger, oh, and by the way, there's another $10 that we're about to collect for this. And I don't see it working.
But you can discount to cash then.
But Mark, the reality when you look at it, first of all, $3, which he said, probably is not the right number. So, what you said you did in your town is rather than charge that passenger the $1.50 to use the credit card in 30% of your fares, you charged 70% of your business to charge more to pay for the 30% of using the card. And you've given an incentive to the driver not to accept the card, so he makes even more money. You gave him a fare increase to pay for the credit card. Now he's going to keep more of it by dissuading the credit card.
All right, starting to, let's take that
Okay.
Sorry about that. It started turning into a real debate for a second. Okay.
Can somebody talk about the Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure Act that Obama signed into law in 2009? It's my understanding that vendors can require a $10 minimum purchase from that law. So somebody can speak about
Somebody
that.
want
And if that's the
to tackle
case,
that?
is that something that a driver is able to enforce?
Yeah, that was, when I said I reported all my stuff to Durbin for years, that act was separate from what is affected to, that was Consumer Protection Act based for cardholders and issuers and banks, et cetera, for charging excessive fees, charging late charges, et cetera. On our industry, that what we're talking about today is the Durbin Amendment, which is an amendment to that act, which when you speak to Senator Durbin, had no clue it was going to pass. He was actually surprised that 12 people switched over at the last minute, and he was shocked when it passed, when he gave a speech at our association meeting out in Vegas. And so part of that rule was two different things. One is anybody that pays pays with a check card now, that rate is lowered, including at a point of sale in a taxi. And it also affects the fact that you can now state a minimum of $10 by rule and regulation and say if it's not $10 minimum, you don't have to take their credit card. So that was part of the Durbin Amendment that starting October 1st of this year is when it can go into effect. But part of the main thing of that is I always don't discourage taking a minimum. You're allowed to give a discount for taking cash or a different form of payment is the main thing they're trying to get across, saying if you think credit cards cost you too much for $10 and under, give a discount for a different way of paying. That's all it was. The purpose of it was to protect me as a card holder and also protect the driver at the same time. So.
Now, George, just as a comment on the $10 discount, because I remember Mark and I had this conversation. So $10, to not accept $10 goes to the merchant. The drivers aren't the merchant. They're driving a car that's regulated by a regulator who sets the rule. So in theory, the owner, whoever is the merchant of record, in Boston's market for my cab, CMT happens to be the merchant. I do what Mark tells me to do. He says you accept credit card, I accept credit card.
Just to follow up, you'd mentioned that you lose money when the charge is under $10. Is that right?
It's a little bit less, but there's a point where the cost, and again, just to put Boston, because Mark said he's 6% of the metered fare. If you think about an average of a 20% tip, it's really, his real cost average is 4.8%, at least in the transactions we've done in 2 years. So he's actually, doing a little bit better than New York and that for his driver, but they don't realize it. But there is a tipping point, and it's a little under $10 where my cost exceeds 5%.
That's all right.
Amos's cost will exceed 5% because, again, who's collecting it? You got the interchange collecting it. But I don't deal with MasterCard and Visa. I have to deal with an acquirer. They provide me a service. They're marking up that cost and they're making their money, and they don't really care about my problems. That's the business they're in. Then if I'm lucky enough to go directly to the acquirer, but generally you have a gateway sitting in between because I don't have the technological sophistication to go directly. So there's usually another person sitting in between your gateway. He's got your hands in his pocket. By the time you get around to we, the poor merchants who have to provide the car, the money goes away really quick. And since we started the program, even in Boston, let alone New York, interchange goes up. Every October we get from MasterCard and Visa, the interchange categories are going up. Not only did they add the dues and assessments, they added a data network fee. They call NABU, a Visa APF, another few cents here. And every time you turn around, there's another fee. And those are transaction charges. Then you move away for how they change the rules of the game. If you submit a transaction, and in half of the cab fleets or most, they'll add the tips later on at night. And if you settle amount different than you authorized, you get penalized, you get downgraded. If you wait a day to submit your transactions, they downgrade you again. So when you look at your statement, that 1.64% rate that the bank said they would give you, and you look at MasterCard, it's doubled before you even got onto the add-ons because you have to do a transaction perfectly to qualify for that rate now.
Okay. We have a question over here. You said it was 4.65?
4.8.
4.8. Okay. All right. Well, it's okay. We have a better baseball team, so it all evens out.
Hi, Ron Martin, Tax Inspector, City, Minneapolis. I'm pleased to see Boston and San Francisco up here. Recently, our taxi code, we're doing some major revisions in it, some of which hasn't been updated since 1983, give or take. One of the things our taxi ordinance is silent about is the use of credit cards. It's not mentioned at all. When I did a best practices study, cut and paste is one way to put it. Influence would be another way. Boston and San Francisco's ordinance on the subject. I've heard two different things from Boston and San Francisco. Boston seems to think that this is the way to go with mandatory. We're looking at that ourselves. San Francisco, I don't get that as much. My question would be, did you guys consider perhaps an optional versus mandatory? In other words, you don't have to take credit cards, but if you do, here are the rules? No.
No, I think, again, we're part of a transportation agency. We handle 5 modes of transportation in the city. Everything that moves in the city, we have something to do with. And because of that integrated role, it's important for us to promote taxi ridership and to get private vehicles off the road and, free up our parking congestion and free up and reduce emissions and things like that. So, no, I think it's 2011 and it's time for everybody to take non-cash forms of payment.